By Vaush advocating for changes to the criminal justice system, which would lead to a higher percentage of prisoners being black, Vaush advocates for policies that promote white supremacism and neo-Nazism by his own flawed logic. Hello everyone, I've got two topics I'm going to be talking about today. The first is YouTuber Vaush advocates for the abolition of property crimes. The second topic of conversation, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are seeking to ban white people from participating in the Paycheck Protection Program.
I would not consider approximately half to be a rare exception. There are a fuck ton of people who are locked up over nonviolent offenses, like an insane number of people.
This isn't going to be a full-fledged response video to Vaush. I'm just using him as a stand-in for the leftist argument that the only crimes that should be prosecuted in the United States are violent crimes. As Vaush points out, using the Bureau of Justice statistics, we can see what percentage of people incarcerated in prisons are there for what crimes. According to the statistics, only 55.2% of all prisoners are incarcerated for violent crimes. Now, social justice warriors like Vaush would like you to believe that the remaining 45% of prisoners are locked up for drug crimes. However, that's just not true. The statistics clearly show only 14.8% of people incarcerated in U.S. prisons are incarcerated on drug crimes. Most of the remainder of those nonviolent incarcerated prisoners are in prison for property offenses at the rate of 17.5%, or public order offenses at the rate of 11.9%. Now, we'll be talking about both of those categories in a second, but the first thing I wanted to point out is if you look at these statistics, you will see that for both property offenses and drug offenses, you will see that both black and Hispanics are incarcerated for property crimes and drug offenses at a lower rate than white criminals. So any insinuation by social justice warriors that the criminal justice system in the United States discriminates against blacks or Hispanics by locking them up disproportionately for drug and property offenses is false. Statistically, in the United States, if you are white, you are more likely to be in prison for a drug or property offense than a black or Hispanic person. I know that's a hard fact to swallow for social justice warriors like Vaush, but the statistics are the statistics. Their narrative of racism in the criminal justice system is just patently false. If in response to arguments like those posed by people like Vaush, the United States were to empty its prison of all drug offenders and all property crime offenders, then the prison population would be even more heavily skewed against black and Hispanics. Now, given the fact that Vaush says things like, if you are an advocate for curbs on illegal immigration, if you want strict enforcement at the US-Mexican border, that makes you a white supremacist because such enforcement statistically would lead to a whiter population in the United States. Well, this is my response to that. By Vaush advocating for changes to the criminal justice system, which would lead to a higher percentage of prisoners being black, Vaush advocates for policies that promote white supremacism and neo-Nazism by his own flawed logic. But for the moment, let us leave the issue of race behind. Is it true that the United States should not incarcerate prisoners who commit property crimes? If you consider yourself any type of liberal or libertarian, which I do not, but if you do, then you have to recognize the concept of property rights. Now, Vaush is someone who describes himself simultaneously as both a socialist as well as an anarchist. Now, as someone who describes himself as an anarchist, Vaush would have to then recognize some sort of concept of individual property rights. And to the extent that he indicates that he is a socialist, I have seen Vaush advocate for example, in his debate with Sargon of Akkad, for worker co-ops. For any worker co-op to be a possibility in an economy, the worker co-op has to have individual property rights over the property that the co-op controls. Otherwise, any other actor in the economy could go in and just take the property of the worker co-op. So if the liberal state abolishes property crimes, if it stops enforcing laws against thieves who go in and take other people's property, then how do these property rights exist anymore? How can I own a home or furniture if literally any other person could enter my house, stay there, take the furniture, or damage the house with no repercussions? What is the property crime that the most people are incarcerated for? Well, if you look at the Bureau of Justice statistics, it happens to be burglary. You know, that crime that's committed when a thief breaks into someone's house and steals shit from their house? I guess Vaush's position is that we're just not going to prosecute people who do that anymore. If someone wants to break into your house and steal your shit, the government's just supposed to do nothing. They're allowed to get away with it. That's that. Here's a real life example that I'm personally familiar with. Let's say that you're a family doctor who owns his own medical practice. After many years of running a profitable business, you're on the verge of bankruptcy. In order to figure out what went wrong, you decide to audit your financial records. Upon doing so, you discover that one of your employees has been stealing from the medical practice. In the last year, this employee has embezzled over $200,000 from the business. You immediately fire this employee and you change the security key code to get into the office. The next day you show up to work and you see that the office door has been pried open with a crowbar. You check the surveillance video and you see the employee you just fired forcibly break into the office. The surveillance video shows that this same ex-employee made copies of all the computer hard drives for all of the computers in the office and also left with stacks of medical records belonging to patients. You subsequently learn that this same employee, over the past several months, has been taking patient social security numbers and opening up lines of credit. You also learned that the same ex-employee had stolen your prescription pad and had been selling prescriptions on the black market, making millions of dollars. When the police department executes a search warrant on the same ex-employee's house, they find that a lot of this money that was earned through embezzlement, identity theft, and selling prescriptions was invested in elaborate machinery used to counterfeit US currency. In the eyes of someone like Vaush, no crime has been committed here. No harm has been done. Even if the medical practice goes bankrupt, even if the doctor loses everything, it doesn't matter, according to Vaush, for reasons of social justice. What about white-collar criminals who steal money from poor and middle-class people? What about someone like Jordan Belfort from the movie Wolf of Wall Street? He made millions of dollars running a fraudulent bucket shop that defrauded thousands of Americans, middle-class, working-class people, out of their life savings. He ended up going to prison for less than 2 years, from which he emerged still incredibly wealthy. To this day, he remains very wealthy despite the fact that he still hasn't paid restitution to his victims. To many, including me, this guy should have served far more time in prison. The brief stint he did serve in a federal minimum security prison seemed more akin to an extended vacation than an actual punishment. He literally got to serve time with a cellmate who was a celebrity comedian. Tommy Chong from the duo Cheech and Chong was Jordan Belfort's cellmate. But I guess according to someone like Vaush, Jordan Belfort shouldn't have served any prison time at all. He shouldn't have even been prosecuted because that's social justice. But what about this other 11.9% of the incarcerated population that's in prison for public order offenses? Surely public order offenses must be complete bullshit, right? Well, the largest percentage of public order offenses are for weapon offenses. So what sort of person goes to prison for a weapons offense that is also not a violent offense? Well, in most circumstances, it's going to be a convicted felon who is determined to be in possession of a gun. Now, when we talk about gun control laws in the United States, this is the gold standard. If the United States stopped prosecuting convicted felons for possessing firearms, then the principal method of gun control utilized in the United States would be eliminated. Is that what Vaush is advocating for? Even less gun control? Maybe so. He calls himself an anarchist after all. I just want to hear it from his own mouth. If you think gun control is bullshit, Vaush, then just say so. Say that you don't think there should be any gun regulations. Say that no one should ever go to prison for violating any gun law. Another large component of the public order offenses, which represents 1.9% of people incarcerated in U.S. prisons, is felony DUI. Now, everyone has their own opinions on DUI laws in the United States, but one thing that I think that most people can agree on is that if you've gotten to the level where it's a felony DUI, you've done fucked up. If you get shit-faced drunk and then you choose to drive a car, but you can't drive good because you're hammered and you end up hitting some other car and you hurt someone or God forbid kill them, then yes, you don't get a free pass for that. This isn't just a DUI anymore, it's a serious crime. Unless, of course, you agree with Vaush, in which case it's not a crime, and that person did nothing wrong and should not be prosecuted for the harm they caused. The second thing that I wanted to talk about today is the new proposal by Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi that would ban white people from applying for loans under the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, for anyone who follows this channel, you will know that the Paycheck Protection Program has been a complete disaster. This program was supposed to help small businesses, but all of the money allocated to it was corruptly maneuvered by big banks like Bank of America to go to large multinational corporations. There ended up being no money left over for actual real small businesses. Right now, President Trump and the Republicans are therefore trying to get more funding allocated to the program. It's been the position of the Democrats, of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, that they're willing to consider additional funding for the program. The only caveat, whites are banned. This is just yet another example of America's blatant people of colorism. When I say people of colorism, I'm referring to the method that certain groups can use under the Civil Rights Act to define themselves as people of color in order to claim special privileges and discriminate against the white majority in this country. Under the Civil Rights Act, if you can establish that you're the member of a group that could properly be considered a person of color-esque group, then you suddenly get entitled to a host of special privileges. First and foremost, any criticism of your group will now be labeled as unacceptable racism, xenophobia. For any American company that has a disproportionate number of your group employed there, the burden is on that employer in any employment discrimination lawsuit to prove that they're not discriminating against your group. Therefore, if these companies don't want to get sued under the Civil Rights Act, well, they better give special privileges to your group. And then, of course, you have all of these government programs that are only available to people of color, just like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are trying to do with the Paycheck Protection Program. They want to ban whites from it entirely, only allow it open to people of color. With the left constantly promoting policies like this, is it any wonder why people on the right are so opposed to immigration? If you are a white person in the United States, why on earth would you ever support any policy that results in more people of color entering the country? I mean, it's just an issue of common sense. If the United States had no people of color, if we had no Civil Rights Act, then you know what? That Paycheck Protection Program might be available for white businesses. It might be possible if you're a white person that you could get a loan under that program. But if there are people of color, then suddenly that becomes problematic. It becomes problematic that these people are in this country. Not that there's anything wrong with people of color, But under the Civil Rights Act, they have special privileges over you. In a period of time where there is limited and scarce resources, those go to the people of color. Meanwhile, white businesses, despite having paid more than their fair share in taxes, are provided no assistance by the government in a time of crisis largely caused by the government's globalist policies. People of colorism is a cancer on the United States. The Civil Rights Act is a cancer on the United States. But anyways, I've got nothing else for you. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. I'll hopefully have another video up for tomorrow.